And I'll never forget the moment where I'm looking at these people, and they were all very average people. Not to say that in a bad way, right? Like they were very relatable. Where I look at these people and I'm like, well, they can do it, I can do it. Like it was this mindset shift of one. I finally just realized that wealth can be created. Life was great, man. It really was great. I had a beautiful wife, 4 amazing kids. I'm on top of the world, and I got accepted as the youngest person to be accepted into this very first initial cadre class in what we call in the Air Force, we call it weapons school. In the Navy, it's called Top Gun. I'm out in Las Vegas doing some flights, and I walk up the hotel room stairs there, and all of a sudden I'm just out of breath. I had 9 tumors in my chest.
I was just going full steam, thinking the next day was going to be just like the last day, going towards my goals, and then it was abruptly stopped. I woke up on April 15th. The industry I was in got shut down by government regulation, and before I knew it, where am I going to go? So I point this out because as we go through this story here, I would not have gotten to where I got to now if I had to go through that. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Wolfpack Nation podcast. My name is Connor Steinbrook, the founder of the Wolfpack. 2,700 agents worldwide in all 50 states, 14 different nations right now. And the way we got here is great leaders like this man on the podcast today. I wore my special shirt for him. It's the Superman American shirt because he is a Superman and an American. He was actually in Top Gun school, and he's going to tell a story about how he had a bad health issue pop up, and it led to a kind of a falling out of his current vision and goal for where he's going in his life. But it led to an amazing comeback story, which we're going to talk about here today, because Matt Gardner on the call, believe it or not, is one of the top Wolfpack agents in North America. He has done about $2.5 million in GCI, not home sales, GCI income with his production business in just the past 2 years. He has over 700 units, apartment units under his control. He's a 3-time icon agent here at EXP, which is a top 1% agent in the company. He has a revenue share organization with 150 agents growing exponentially. And he is a new author and has written a book called Supersonic Real Estate, which is why I got the Superman shirt on today. Let's get the Superman on the podcast. Matt Gardner, good friend of mine. Very impressed with you and your story and everything you're doing. Let's get you on here. And excited to have you on here, bud.
Awesome, man. Definitely happy to chat with you again, man. It's we don't get to see each other physically all that often, and we got to finally connect again, at the shareholder summit. So it's always good to chat, my man.
Yeah, that's right. We were running around Universal Studios and we rode like the most intense roller coaster. I think it's called like the Velociraptorsaurus or something.
Oh, awesome.
And to me, it about killed me. And I get off and I was like, what was that? And he was like, it's a Mach 3 or G3 or something like that. And I was like, what is it when you're in a top 15 or F-15 fighter pilot? He's like, it's like 8 Mach or something like that. And I was like, oh, geez, yeah. guess I'm a wussy here. But yeah, it was fun. And the cool thing about being part of EXP is we get to do incredible things like that. Our founder of our company, Glenn Stanford, actually rented out Universal Studios for 3 hours and spent almost $1 million out of pocket just as a thank you to us as the agents. So we got to run ride to ride to ride, pretty much go do everything we wanted. But just another perk of coming to the company. So if you listen to this podcast and you like Matt, maybe reach out to him. But anyways, man, let's go ahead and get you into your story. And then we'll talk about the book and kind of how you did all this, because you have one of the biggest comeback stories I know of and best comeback stories. But maybe tell from the beginning on where your mindset was at when you went off to Top Gun school, because he's legit, guys, just like Tom Cruise, a real life Top Gun. So kind of tell that story, and then let's get into your success after it. And I want you guys to understand sometimes mass adversity in life leads to mass success later. And you'll hear about that through the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I was a fighter pilot, pretty basic kind of poor man mindset. If you were poor dad mindset, Robert Kiyosaki kind of background of like, I was military. I was in this, what I thought was a secure job flying. I flew F-15s for about 5-6 years. And then I flew F-35s, which is the new joint stealth fighter jet that the Air Force has. And I flew that for another 5 years or so as an instructor, teaching people how to fly and be a fighter pilot in the stealth fighter jet world. And life was great, man. I really was great. I had a beautiful wife, 4 amazing kids. I'm on top of the world, and I got accepted as the youngest person to be accepted into this very first initial cadre class in what we call in the Air Force, we call it weapons school. In the Navy, it's called Top Gun. So super excited, got accepted to this class of just 6 people in the entire Air Force to get accepted to this class. And while I'm getting prepped up and trained up for this training, I'm out in Las Vegas doing some flights, and I walk up the hotel room stairs there, and all of a sudden I'm just out of breath. I'm like 32, I'm healthy, I'm a pilot. It was just weird to be out of breath there. And I come back home after that trip, and I tell my flight doc, my lymph node was swollen too, but I didn't feel sick. And I told her, and they did a scan of my chest at that point, and then I had 9 tumors in my chest. One of them was literally the size of a softball between my heart and my spine. So that was definitely a eye-opening experience, kind of going from truly on top of the world to, in a matter of a week, finding out that you probably have cancer, right? It was just a scan. You weren't sure yet. And then 2 days later, 3 days later, whenever it was, shortly thereafter, I go to my flight doc. I said, I have some chest pain in my chest. And we did an echocardiogram to see what was going on in the heart. And basically my heart was trying to strangle itself in simple terms. And so I had to get emergency heart surgery. The cardiologist said, hey, dude, in a matter of about 48 hours, your heart's probably going to stop working. So I had to go get heart surgery. And while I'm recovering from that, I find out that I have cancer, find out what type of cancer it is. And then chemotherapy started after that. So like to go from on top of the world, like truly living every little boy's dream to kind of all crashing down. And then that's where real estate came in. I was introduced to real estate while I was doing chemotherapy in the hospital. I went basically as a fighter pilot, especially as an instructor fighter pilot. I'd spend 10 to 12-hour days in a vault, studying tactics on the best way to shoot missiles, the best way to drop bombs, how we can kind of infiltrate different enemy territory. To now I was in a hospital studying real estate tactics, finding people like Connor Steinbrook, Investor Army. I was like trying to find these different outlets to be the best tactician I can in the real estate space. And I got hooked, man. I got bit by the real estate bug, and that's where it just kind of started. That was kind of the origin story there.
A lot of people are dealing with adversity right now, mindset issues, self-esteem issues, anxiety, stress. Kind of step back in that moment if you could. I know it's probably tough. What was going through your mind? Like, I think a lot of us have that fear in the future that what if one day we get that bad health diagnosis, but we always assume it's never going to happen to us until it does. And let's talk about kind of like the mindset, how you came out of this, because we find ourselves in the story of others. So we're going to talk about what he's accomplished after this, but what was it like at that moment? And maybe some words to encourage some other people that may have had bad advice. Or not advice, bad things, information come in just now that shook up their world a little bit.
Yeah, I will say, like I said, I had that kind of poor dad mentality to where when I realized that there was a chance that I might get kicked out of the military for medical reasons, I looked at my bank account. I didn't realize I was living paycheck to paycheck. You don't feel like it when you're in that salary type job until you realize that it can be taken away. And you're like, oh crap, I only had $2,000 in my savings. So wife, 4 kids, like that's not even going to last us a month, And so I didn't realize that I was living such a bad financial lifestyle. So from the financial kind of mentality, it was definitely very, very eye-opening for me to read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that really opened my eyes financially to wealth creation and all that fun stuff in that world. But from the pure, just like individual mindset perspective, being in the military and kind of going through the training we've had with my background prior to this as well, I've just always kind of had that mindset of, we're going to work as hard as we need to work in order to build up whatever we need to build up. But it's definitely a scary proposition, right? Like I'm not one to cry, but whenever I got the diagnosis, I remember I called my mother on the way home to kind of spread the news to her. And I was like, I got this, whatever, tell my mom what's going on. And, my mom, she's the most amazing person in the world. And she was just like, well, I'm here for you. I love you. Let me know when I come down. And that's when just the tears started pouring down my face. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't control. And that was honestly, it was really refreshing for me to finally kind of break down. I think I needed to break down in order to kind of build myself back up.
Yep. So both of us have a kind of similar story. We both have a comeback story. I think yours is a little bit cooler than mine because I just had my career taken away from government regulation. Some of you guys know I was a top online poker player, but it's a very similar thing. I was just going full steam, thinking the next day was going to be just like the last day, going towards my goals. And then it was abruptly stopped. I woke up on April 15th. The industry I was in got shut down by government regulation. And before I knew it, where am I going to go? So I'm pointing this out because as we go through his story here, I would not have gotten to where I got to now if I had not had to go through that. And I think he's probably going to agree with me because he's shaking his head.
100%.
But it is these moments that test us, that put us in the darkness, that we fight out of the darkness, that builds the strength for us to carry what we're going to lift later, which is a big business, something as far as like anything big to achieve in life. But so you started reading and went down the path of self-development. This is kind of where I went as well. Rich Dad, Poor Dad was very influential for me. Think and Go Rich, some of the other cliche books, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then I got into, Jim Rohn, Bob Proctor, Les Brown, where we're kind of give an idea of as your personal development path started, you were consuming books, podcasts. Like what did it look like? How many books were you reading? Were you going to local networking events or just so people could kind of follow in your steps on kind of how you started this path?
Yeah, for sure. I, like I said, I was basically strapped to the hotel room or the hospital floor for doing chemo. And I'd probably say in the 6 months of chemo, I probably read 50 to 60 different books. A lot of the traditional ones, like you said, a lot of the cliched books that, you name it. If it's a popular real estate book, I probably, crushed it during that time. Some of the books I read multiple times because you read it, you're like, wow, this is like when a light bulb turns on, it's almost like a religious experience. I'll be honest with you, where you're just like, I really, this is crazy. I didn't know this could exist. And you'd have this new belief that what's possible. But yeah, books were definitely the initial foundation of kind of building that education so I can then speak the language. I got hooked into the Bigger Pockets network. Just kind of, I say hooked into, I just jumped in. It's effectively an online forum that you can kind of engage in. So I started engaging there. It's a podcast as well. Started listening to that podcast and some other real estate podcasts. And then it was definitely meetups. So I started going to local meetups, joined my local RIA, which is only one in my area. And then through that, I met a fantastic local investor that I kind of clung on to. It was her and her husband, and they were going to go speak at a bigger event in California. And I'll never forget, because I was full chemo mode, dude. No eyebrows, no hair, like full, sickly looking chemo dude. And they were the most kind people in the world. They said, hey, we're actually going to be keynote speakers at this event. It's called Flip Hacking Live out in San Diego. I said, oh, it sounds great. Like, I'd love to join. And they said, all right, well, here's the information. They passed me the info. It was like $1,000 for a ticket. I had to fly out to California. Like I said, I didn't have much money in my bank account at the time. So I said, hey guys, I really appreciate the invite, but like, this would literally wipe me out. I'm not willing to like risk my life savings right now in order to do this. And they said, no, we're keynote speakers. We can get you a ticket for free. I was like, I can't pass that up. Right. And so that was really the pivotal moment for me. So I got myself out there, and that's when I saw people on stage on a bigger scale who were crushing it. Everyone who went on stage were making at least 7 to 8 figures on stage. And I'll never forget the moment where I'm looking at these people, and they were all very average people. Not to say that in a bad way, right? Like they were very relatable, where I look at these people and I'm like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Like it was this mindset shift of 100%. One, I finally just realized that wealth can be created. Like it's a thing that you can actually do. And then, reading these books, I feel like it's almost untouchable people doing these things, looking at Connor online, like, yeah, sure, Connor can do it, but he's different. He's got other skills that I don't have. Right. But then I go to this event and I'm meeting these people face to face. And I'm like, wow, geez, it was just that moment of clarity of like, wow, okay, I think I can actually do it. And once that mindset was there that I believed that I could do it, a lot of obstacles really kind of dropped in front of me.
Yeah, it almost gave me the chills because it parallels my story so much, because when I lost my career, I went into insurance before I went into real estate. And I actually had a very similar situation where I was living at home, massively in debt, didn't have the money, but I joined a company called WFG. And if you don't know what World Financial Group is, you probably know who Ed Milet is. We actually just saw Ed Milet at the XP shareholders event because Glenn didn't just rent out Universal Studios. He brought Ed Milet, the top speaker in the world, to the event. But anyways, I went to an event. I didn't have the money. My upline partners were like, you have to get out here. I borrowed it from my parents. I flew out there, and it was on the gala night. I tell this story numerous times over the years, watching these, a lot of them immigrated here. I remember one specifically from like Vietnam telling a story how he's swimming out, being shot at, literally climbing on a boat with his family, escaping, and now he's got a 7-figure income. Yeah. And all these people walking across stage talking about they're making 7 figures, and it created that belief system within me that this is possible. And that's really all you need to pull the trigger on taking risk with your future, meaning you're going to put up time, money, and emotion. And it's the lack of belief that it can actually happen for you that keeps you from pushing past that risk point and going for it. But once you know it's possible and you truly believe it's possible, that's when you swing for the fences. And the other thing is, when you go to these big events, the information shares freely. People are not local in like a local market trying to hold things close to their chest. So if you're going to a California event versus Florida event, these are not your local competitors. So they're going to share with you things at dinners and at the meetings that they wouldn't share locally. And then you're going to share with them. And so information flows freely. And these are why it's really important to get out to these types of events. But I just want to put that in there. So you went out there. What was your first process into real estate? So you started in the investment world first. Later, you got licensed.
It was kind of almost simultaneous. They were parallel paths, intentional parallel paths. And so one of the books that I read, I think it was High Performance Habits, or maybe 4-Hour Workweek, one of the two, where they talk about credibility indicators. And, you want to check as many boxes as you can to build up your credibility. And it was almost like I don't want to say an artificial, but a fast track way to building credibility, right? And some of those things would be getting licensed, and if you're talking to somebody as an investor, you say, oh, I'm also a real estate agent. Okay, well, you got some credibility there. I started my own meetup, my local meetup. So now I ran my own meetup, and I was a licensed agent. So now like people are like, oh, they look to you as this superior person, but all I did was spend, $100 for meetup.com and got my license. And so all of a sudden now I started to kind of build up this credibility amongst the community at that point. But yeah, so simultaneously sales and investing. But what I found is, why not just work both intentionally? Like, why not as an agent just focus on working with investors? Because that means I'm going to be trying to find investment deals. And if my clients don't want them, I can just get them. And it really just became this kind of self-licking ice cream cone where it worked on both sides. And as I've grown with a portfolio and with my client base, a lot of my clients who came to me to buy a house, they're now just investing with me through like my syndication deals, or we'll do JVs and other opportunities. So it's really kind of grown into something beautiful, really.
So like you did one of the things that I've seen happen numerous times. Most people don't really go the path you did, which is most people go from like wholesaling to flipping to landlording to owner financing and eventually apartments. Like you just went straight for the big deals, which I respect, and kind of give your mindset in that, because I think a lot of people think they have to kind of slowly kind of earn their way up and go the levels, level to level to level. It's just not the fact. If you think you can do it day one, you can do it. I've seen people, I hear stories all the time and I meet them all the time. I just went straight and bought a massive apartment complex, first deal, financially free. So you went big, and kind of give your mindset on that, or how you made that decision process. And because it is a risk, but you did it and it's working out for you. And maybe just kind of give your take on that for any of them listening right now that may be thinking of going bigger. They're kind of holding back on it right now.
Yeah, for sure. I in my mind, there's kind of two schools of thought when it comes to that. There's kind of the Gary Keller, the one thing mentality, right? We can focus on one thing and just really make it kind of a soda straw. This is all I'm going after. And I think there's a lot of benefits to that, because you have so much clarity in kind of what your goal is. And then there's the other, what I call my mother's advice when I was a teenager. She's like, Matt, date around. Date as many girls as you can. That way, like when you finally want to settle down, you'll at least know what you're getting into and know what you like. You know what I mean? I was like, that's great. That gave me the chance to go meet and hang out with as many girls as I could at the time. And so that was the mentality I kind of took up front. I said, all right, let me try a flip. Let me try a wholesale. I was like, wholesale's not for me. And so I didn't dive deeply into anything. It was kind of a shallow experience for each of them. I did some flips. I tried to wholesale a little bit. Honestly, it just wasn't for me. Did some short-term rentals, did some long-term rentals. And so it kind of jumped into the different mixes there. And ultimately, the more I experienced in these different smaller, we'll say, asset classes, most people are trying to, like you said, trying to get to that next level of multifamily. So my mindset was like, okay, like why do I need to feel like I go through these steps to jump to multifamily? So I just jumped right over, basically. And to your point, you don't need the massive experience. I think having a broad experience helps, but it's not required by any means. I have a coaching program where we coach in the multifamily space, teach people how to do syndications. And in that space, we have people who have done it before, who have done like a bunch of broader investing, single family world, and then they jump into the syndication space. But we have plenty of people who jump right in, and it's very successful for them, as long as you kind of have the right support team to start off with.
Well, guys, we'll put below this podcast in the description all Matt's links to social and his websites and things like that. So you blew up to like 700 units pretty quickly. But along the way, doing that, you also did a ton of production. You actually just spoke on stage at EXP, being recognized for your production ability. So you did like something like what, $2.5 million in GCI income in just the past 2 years.
Yeah.
How did you do such a large volume? Is this you're working with the investors, doing repeat transactions, or kind of give an idea for someone that wants to do $1 million plus GCI, how you did it in such a short time?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the benefit of working with investors over a traditional retail client, a lot of people say, list the last. And I totally agree. Like that's one path to financial freedom and financial wealth within the real estate sales space. But I said, since I'm already an investor-minded person, I'm already personally in investing, might as well just focus on that, so I can just focus all my energy on one space. So 90% of my production is buyers, which blows people away when you find you made $2.5 million by working with buyers almost exclusively. But exactly to your point, the nice thing about working with investors, I've had probably 10 or 20 different investors who will buy multiple deals with me. And as you get into the niches, you can see you can, like for me in the Destin, Florida and Tampa, Florida areas, short-term rentals were big. And so the price points can be a little bit larger there as well. So you can find a cash flowing property for $2 million, in Destin, where that's not a common thing. In maybe a Houston area, you're not going to find a long-term rental for $2 million that cash flows, at least in the single family world. And so it was definitely just working with investors and trying to add value wherever I could. And there's not a lot of agents who really understand investing, like truly understand investing. And that's what I found. I'll give you a quick story here. And so right when I got licensed, I'm learning all this stuff at the same time as in investing. I go to my very first real estate investing class brought on by the real estate local association. So I was hyped, man. I was like, okay, I'm a licensed agent. I'm learning from these wholesalers who just kind of seem, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? disorganized in the wholesaling space. Like, it's not an organized space.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
A little bit out there.
Yeah. So I'm going to go like the professional.
Entry. It's where people get into industry. So it's the kind of barrier entry strategy. So that's why it's a little chaotic. But
yeah, it's chaotic. That's a good word. Chaotic. Yeah. And so I was like, all right, this is it. I'm going to go to like a licensed real estate agent who is licensed to teach a course on real estate investing. Like I was stoked to like learn from the people. And so I go to this class. It was a 4-hour class at the local association. In the first hour, the instructor's just confusing basic terms. She'll say, oh, the cap rate for this one is $200 a month and it'll cash flow at 8%. I'm like, I think you're confusing those terms. So I kept like correcting her just on basic terminology in education. Yep. And at around hour, like 2.5 to around hour 2.5 or so, I couldn't stand anymore. I was like, hey, like, can I just describe this a little bit? Let me just, because I didn't want her to teach the people the wrong thing, because then it just propagates more bad data. Yeah. And so what ended up happening, she's like, actually, why don't you just come up and tell us about this one? Because I told her about a deal I was analyzing. I actually ended up teaching the last hour and a half of class, and I had just got my license like a week prior. And so it was really eye-opening to me to see at that point I'm going to generalize here. Generally, real estate agents at large don't have a really good foundation in real estate investing. There are plenty who are killers in the real estate investing space. Don't get me wrong, but a vast majority of real estate agents couldn't tell you the basic terminology. They couldn't tell you what ARV means versus ROI versus, they couldn't tell you the difference between IRR, ROI, or, any of these things, where as an investor, you need to know the basic terms. Anyways, side story, but yeah.
Let me go through just these quick talking points real quick, and then we're going to go into productivity and how you manage all this. Once again, on the sales side, he's doing $1 million+ GCI a year. He's building a large real estate organization. And if you guys want to partner with Matt, you can reach out to him globally. And he does provide a lot for his agents, and you can get in close proximity with him and work with him daily. He's a 3-time Icon agent. Once again, 700 units. He started an REI school. Now he's written a book. How do you do all this? Let's look at the productivity side.
Yeah.
You have staff, you have virtual assistants. Let's just look at kind of like the support system first, and then maybe kind of like, calendar systems. Like how do you manage all this and do so many things? Because this is a lot all at once. And to most people, it's like their mind probably can't even comprehend it, but there has to be a way that's being done because, well, you did it.
Yeah. It started organically for sure. So when I started in the space, I was still a full-time military duty. I hadn't been kicked out yet. And so I started doing sales and investing while I was still active duty as an officer in the military. I was still instructing people. I wasn't flying, but I was in the simulator. So I still had a full work day after I was out of chemo, but while the military was still trying to figure out what they're going to do with me. And it got to the point where I was getting so busy, I needed to work during the workday, but I couldn't work. So that was my very first leverage point. Was I hired a personal assistant. And so before I went into work, I said, hey, here's your task I need you to knock out. She would work for me during the workday. We'd do a little debrief after I'm done with work. And then I would work from 6 to midnight, basically, or 7 to midnight after I got home. And so I was burning the candles on both ends intentionally, because the writing was on the wall that I was probably going to be getting the boot out of the military. But as it's grown, what I like to think of it is what I call the investing triad, where in every investor, in every investment opportunity, and really business opportunity, there's kind of 3 aspects you need, which are time, money, and knowledge, right? And so as long as you have at least 2 of those 3, you can really leverage the third. And so my very first flip I didn't have much money, like I said, but I had the knowledge and I had the time. At that time, I had extra time. And so I said, okay, how can I leverage somebody else's money if I have these 2 other aspects in the investing triad? And what I did, I threw a post on Bigger Pockets. I found somebody who reached out to me from Hawaii. He's like, hey, dude, I got $50,000. It can barely buy me a gallon of milk in Hawaii. Let me know if you want to invest. Let's do this. I threw another random video on YouTube that said, hey, you could use your investment funds to invest in real estate. This is crazy. And somebody reached out to me and said, hey, I got $300,000 in my IRA. It's not doing really well. Let me know if you want to invest with me. And so they wired their money in for this first deal that I presented to them. We did it all together. That very first deal I invested was $100 to start a business bank account and $150 to start my LLC. They wired in the other $100,000 needed to get the deal going. I ran the whole deal. And in the end, we collectively made almost $50,000. And so it was just cool to see that this whole concept of the investing triad. So now as I've grown, I have the money aspect. That's not a factor. And I have the knowledge, but now I'm really more leveraging the time piece. And so every partnership I get into, Like when I join these different syndications, I say, hey guys, I'm happy to be, the analyzer or raise money or kind of the one-off project guy. If there's a specific capital project we're trying to like accomplish, I'm happy to work towards specific projects, but I can't be the guy who's on a weekly basis meeting with the property managers. I don't have the time to dedicate to that. So time is my weakness. And so every business I get into now, every real estate opportunity I jump into, even in my sales space, like I am traditionally not the one showing houses. I leverage my assistant, I leverage my team, I leverage my transaction coordinator to do a lot of the legwork, where I'll be there and talk to the sales and talk to numbers, but my team does a lot of the other work for me. So just really intentionally leveraging and delegating.
Well, you hear what he's saying. He's leveraging time with virtual assistants, leveraging money, other people's money. And this is where I think a lot of young entrepreneurs get caught up. They think they have to have their own money, or I don't have any money, so I can't do this. He literally just explained how he zero his own money and start his business. So you need to get outside of the resource mindset and think about resourcefulness. You probably heard that analogy, meaning go find the people that have the resources that don't have time, because wealthy people, they're not worried about money. They're worried about time and stress and emotion. And so people that are newer in the business are always worried about money. So when you know these two things, you know how people make decisions. So like if you're going to try to go get a mentor, like you're never going to go up to someone like, Matt, or be like, hey, let me get into your life because we can make some money together. Well, maybe depending on what the deal is. But if you're going to say, hey, let me take a bunch of time and stress off your plate, you're going to start to get in close with Matt. So like when I started my career, I went to some of these local REI clubs, some of my original mentors. And that's what I did. I said, I'm gonna work for you for free. And I worked their front desks. I helped people check into the REI clubs. And this is where I made a lot of relationships where these mentors of mine connected me to people locally. And it was working for free that led me to making millions of dollars. So I want you guys to start thinking a little bit differently. You don't need money. You need people around you that have money. You need to start thinking about how to not ask or be entitled for something to be given to you, but how do you leave a value first and give to others and watch what happens and watch which doors open. But maybe give your take on like where you think a lot of people get stuck throughout the week and year on scaling, a lot of their bottlenecks. What's kind of your take on that? Is you think it's more just like they're not serious and they think they don't have a lot of time, or do you think a lot of people are really having time management issues, or is it kind of like an illusion in their mind where they're not really working? They're at the desk, kind of moving things around. It's in its efficiency or productivity type of thing. Not that they're putting the time into it. They're there with their time, but is it a productivity issue?
Yeah, that latter point is 100% a factor. In today's world, it's so easy to feel like you're being productive, but you're really just being busy, right? And that is 100% a factor where, I'm gonna focus on this real estate post that I'm doing on Instagram. Like that's great. Like, and you should be building a marketing presence. Don't get me wrong, but when people are doing that over whatever lead generation strategy they're trying to attain, and they're spending more time on their marketing social media posts than they are actually doing what I consider work, that's 100% a factor. The other piece is just perseverance. Like the concept of grit. I think there's a lot of people in today's world have an attention span that's just way too short, and so they'll get excited and they'll focus on something and then they'll kind of go at it really hard and they'll sprint. They don't realize it's a marathon. So they'll sprint for a week or two, or maybe even a month or two. And they're like, man, I only got one sale, man. I'm like, okay, like this is not a short race, man. Like if you're actually consistently putting in the right effort, not just being busy, you will succeed. It's not a matter of like, can I succeed? It's if you're truly, like I tell my agents, cold calling is probably one of the most direct, efficient ways of getting business. It's not the easiest, right? But it is the most direct way to get in front of people. But if you truly dedicate, we'll say 2 hours, even just 2 hours a day, 5 days a week for a year to cold calling, and legitimately cold calling, not like putting notes in CRM, but just straight up cold calling for that time, you can't fail. Like honestly, you can't, unless you're just, I don't know how you could fail if you truly put in that work.
So like from our side, now that we've been successful, we understand that. But from the other side, it's like, well, it makes, it's still this risk. But what he's saying is there's no competition out there. And that's what I didn't realize either. It's like, you think there's this big monster and all these dragons, these monsters in the industry that you're going to compete against, that they're going to crush you. It's just not. As you start to get out there and see who's actually working and who, like, for example, I go to the gym on Saturday one time and I did a video. Nobody was at the gym. And I was basically saying, all you guys have to do is show up to win today. Everybody is so distracted with short form content. They got their families and everything. If you can just focus, show up every day over a long period of time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I don't see how you cannot be successful. And I think one of those stats out there that I hate hearing, which is 95% of business owners fail and only 5% succeed, I think it's just a lie. I think it's saying we're averaging in all the people that's tried something for a day or a week or a month and quit. If you took those people out and averaged the people that gave it their all, put their heart into it, put all their money, put all their time, put their full intent into it, I think you're going to see well over half people, if not most all people, pull off a successful business. And it may be an argument that 100% of people that literally put the foot down, hit the pedal, and never let off, they'll figure it out over time. So what's your take on that? Because it drives me nuts to see that statistic, because I think it's cost a lot of people their future that could have pulled it off because they believe I'm going down a dead end path that's not going to work out anyways. And it's just simply not true. I see people all the time that shouldn't be successful in business that are massively successful, and then people that probably should be successful in business that are not. And I think the smarter they are, unfortunately, the more they tie to statistics and they back off that type of stuff, and they bounce around to thing to thing to thing.
Yeah. I mean, I like to equate it, and the way I kind of visualize it as a pilot early on was, if your career is like an airplane trying to take off a runway, right? And a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of power that you need to go full power in the engines to really get these planes taken off. And once you get airborne, I think a lot of people, like, you're off the ground. People are like, okay, like, I'm airborne now, right? And maybe they have a little bit of success and then they kind of pull back into power. But that's the last time you want to be pulling back into power, when you're trying to, really take off. And a lot of people, that's what we call a critical phase of flight, where a lot of people crash on takeoffs. It's a factor. And so as a fighter pilot, I'm like, okay, I could take off, I can go mil power, and I could be consistent. And I know I'll get to my altitude of 30,000 feet or wherever I'm trying to go. But my mentality was even more. I intentionally imbalanced my life. And I had this discussion with my wife. I said, and kids, I sat down, we were like, all right, guys, I'm going to try to jump into this real estate thing, feet first, because as the Air Force was kicking me out, I was offered a job for almost $200,000 a year, a secure job, working in a vault as a retired person. Right. And I was like, dude, this sounds terrible. I want to poke my eyes out just thinking about it. I was like, I want to try to take a risk on myself here. And so I told my wife, I was like, hey guys, for the next 2 to 3 years, like, I'm going to do as much as I can to get us set up for success in the long run. And they were behind me for it, so they knew I was going to be working even more once I got out of the military. And so rather than me just going full power and slowly getting off to that 30,000 foot, cruise altitude that I can finally pull back on the throttles, I said, I'm going to light this thing in max afterburner, man. I'm going to freaking max afterburner. I'm going to do an unrestricted climb as high as I can, as quick as I can, to get to that altitude. And then I'll level off and enjoy the ride. And so that was kind of my mentality there.
How much did your family impact, you think, your drive and your motivation and your success? Because it's two different sides I see of this. I see some people say the reason why they're not successful is because they have a family and children, and that's what's distracting them and they can't do it. And I see some people where it's the family that says, or they're like, I'm just, no matter what, if I have to literally die to do this, I'm going to put it all on the line because I'm doing it for my family. How much did your family have an impact? And then also, do you think, how much did your situation where your health and that kind of play into it? Did that lead to your aggressive work ethic? Because something has to put the energy behind you to drive you that hard. It's not just like, hey, I want a Lamborghini. Something drives you when you push as hard as you have to get to where you got to.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, like, the work ethics piece, that's something that I think has just been ingrained in me for a while. My father, not to get too in the weeds in the story, because it's another tangent, but basically he died when I was 13 all of a sudden. And he, about a month prior to him dying, he canceled his life insurance. And so we didn't have a bunch of cash. He was young, he was healthy, kind of similar thing, surprise, accident. And from there, I think that was the big moment in my life where I was like, I'm concerned about money, so I was going to work as much as I could. So I got a job right away. I did door-to-door sales in Brooklyn and Queens and New York City. I was like, I'm going to grind whatever I need to grind in order to make money for my family, for my friends, for myself, to make sure we're at least set. So the work ethic piece was one thing. And I think people also need to realize that, you and I also aren't succeeding in everything. Like, we're always falling short in different aspects of our life. Every time I go to these events, I'm like, man, I really should be doing better, more YouTube. Like, YouTube is like there's like evergreen content, and Connor's crushing it there, and there's other people are crushing there. And, once you can kind of set it, and really, it's the type of thing you can kind of pull back and kind of enjoy the residuals from it. But man, I'm not doing that. So I'm falling short. So I feel there's times where, I look at people and you think their life is set, and you think they don't have struggles, but you also need to realize that everyone's struggling through something. It's just a kind of different thought process.
Yeah. I mean, just hearing your story, I think a lot of, just my opinion, and just knowing from how my story played out, is this the mental toughness side that you have that, when you lose your family at a young age, you go through a health issue like you did and you lose your career. Once you get into like the things that I think knock people out of business that they would assume are tough because it's their first perspective of something that's probably difficult after college, to them, it's like very difficult. But when you've gone through some of the life adversities that you have, when you get to these small adversities, which we would say now, it probably doesn't seem like that big a deal. And so I think the mental toughness side is huge for entrepreneurs. And so some of you guys need to actually go find adversity and kind of have some rough times. It'll actually help you. So if you take that mental toughness plus work ethic plus skill sets and add that across time, you end up someone like Matt here, or in a different version. It doesn't matter if you're in insurance or you start a restaurant or whatever it is, but it takes all those. It takes work ethic, mental toughness, and time and skill sets to really kind of create the outcome of a success cake if you're thinking what goes into it while you're kind of cooking it up. But
yeah, sure.
Is there anything specifically we got about 10, 15 minutes here. Do you want to go into your book? And
sure.
Then maybe anything else you would think to go into that could probably help these listeners. But so you've had an incredible run here, and you're telling your story in a book. Let's talk about that. So it's called Supersonic Real Estate.
That's right. Supersonic Real Estate. The book is primarily focused to help a real estate agent who wants to really accelerate their career. So it's either trying to get more production by working with investors. So we talk about how to find and how to work with investors, or an agent who really wants to become an investor. So we kind of talk strategies and stuff on that. And so it's all the transition of really increasing productivity as well as increasing your own portfolio to give yourself an exit strategy. One thing I love about EXP, it's one more, feather in the cap of an exit strategy that we can kind of rely on. But I'm not a fan of relying on just a single revenue source for my future. So I want to make sure I have as many options as I can for exit strategies. And so that's really what kind of the book culminates in, is teaching people how to be investors as agents. And as an investor, it can also be beneficial. Like if you want to understand the agent mindset, or if you have some agents you want to work with, but they're not quite hitting the mark, you can kind of give them the book that, hey guys, like here's some tips and tactics for you to be a better real estate agent for me as an investor. So it's a good gift to give agents as well.
And I talk about your take on multiple streams of income. So like I've had a lot of conversations with people in entrepreneurship about this, because I think people don't understand what multiple streams of income actually does or is really used for. So a lot of people think multiple streams of income is just to increase your income. Now, if you have multiple streams of income that are all positive, yes, that increases it. But when you really think about it, it's really for insurance purposes. So let's say that you had one income stream like I did as an online poker player and it goes away. Where am I now? So let's say you had 1 billion income streams. They all make $1. Then you had one income stream that makes $1 billion on its own. What that shows is you're making a billion, but 1 billion income streams in relationship to one. Shows there's zero relationship between how many income streams you have and your actual income. It's more of an insurance policy in my mindset, because let's say you just had that $1 billion income stream and it goes away. What are you leaning on right now? So I believe people should have at least 3, because if you have 2 and you lose 1, you're right back to that vulnerable position. Yeah. And also when you're operating with one income stream, guys, it's a stress management, emotional management. If it goes away, you live in that kind of fear. Once you add 2 or 3, it's kind of in a way that even if you don't have your financial freedom numbers as far as an income yet, it still creates kind of that same security in the mindset to operate freely as you would if you'd already got to that financial freedom number, because you have some security. If one of these goes away, you can still make the bills and things like that. So what's your take on that? Because it is important. Have you ever heard anybody explain it like that? Or
no, I think that's 100% right. I think you're hedging your bets is what you're doing by adding more. It's what's the word? Different redundancies, right? So like you might have. It doesn't make sense to have a triple redundant system that has a single point of failure, right? Because then it's really just a single point of failure. You're only as good as your weakest link. And so if you truly have these different income streams, and you hit the nail on the head. I never thought of it that way, to where as I've kind of gained these different revenue streams, the stress has really kind of reduced. It's not really because I'm making more money. It's really because I'm not thinking about, okay, well, if EXP goes under, then all of a sudden I'm screwed, as an example, which is, a couple of my revenue streams. And so that is definitely a big aspect of it. For me, when I was kind of growing, I got connected with a group called Wealth Gym, another great kind of group of teaching like wealth tactics and mentalities. And they discussed, the very first level is get rid of high interest debt. For me, that was, I didn't have a ton of debt, luckily, but I got rid of any high interest debt. The next one was really getting your reserve fund set up. And for me, I wanted to have at least 12 months. And they'll often say 6 months or 3 months, whatever that reserve fund needs to be. And then have that in a completely separate bank account, separate area that you don't ever see it. It's really just kind of your comfort blanket that it's there. to where whenever I jumped into real estate, it was nice when I finally got that reserve fund all the way set up to where if I lose all of my limbs tomorrow and I can't work at all, I know my family's at least set for a year, and that's 12 months for me to figure out my life. And I'm pretty confident I'll land on my feet in 12 months. And then after that, man, all my rest of my money goes to investing and trying to find as many different revenue streams as possible. To really, that to me is the key to long-term wealth for sure.
There's nothing guaranteed in the future. I mean, we may have
Yes.
AI robots that are real estate agents here in the future, like straight up like iRobot type of stuff. Hopefully not.
Oh yeah.
But the world's getting a little crazy. But coming down the home stretch here, is there anything else that maybe I haven't thought to ask you that you've been talking about with your agents or anything? Just state of the world, anything as far as good advice? That was kind of a vague question, but
no, I think there's a lot of agents who are struggling. I mean, currently I looked at the NAR reports from last month. NAR has lost 50,000 agents since the beginning of the year. That's significant. That's a lot of agents who are leaving the industry. So you can look at that one of two ways. You can look at it as like the sky is falling and crap, now's a terrible time for real estate, so go find something else to do. Or you can look at it as an opportunity, like, okay, everyone else is leaving, so like, now's the time to really capture market share and really work even harder. So
I know, man. I just don't get it. Like, to me, it's like I'm sprinting as people are like running by me this way. I'm
yes.
like, this is like, and I mean it. Like, and I think you mean, like, I don't understand why people don't get that basic concept when they do it opposite. I'm about to lose my voice here. When everybody's running from something, you run to it. And the only way you're ever going to time. So people are like, well, how do you time the bottom of the market? How do you get lucky? You never leave the market. You ride every cycle up and down like the roller coasters we're on. You're at the top and the bottom. As long as you don't get off the roller coaster, you will nail every single bottom. That's what people don't understand. Now you're going to have to pay some pain and suffering going down. Not always fun. Probably heard me screaming. Matt's probably like, is that a girl in front of me? Just kidding. On the roller coaster. But if you want to time the bottom of the market and have a big, 7, 8, 10, 12-year bull run, you have to stay in the market on the way down. And it's also it gets tougher. You're working for less. I get it's stressful, but you're building stronger skill sets and you're building more mental fortitude and you're building yourself stronger than you would have in an easy market. Anybody can show up and win when it's easy to win. It's when it's tough that you build the skill sets that take you into when the market turns explosive mode, because now this is easy. Now it's a joke. Now you already have your systems in place. You're not having to, okay, I was running these other businesses. Now the news is saying real estate market's hot. I'm going to pop back in and now start trying to ramp things up. Now you're behind the curve and everybody else has already picked up market share that you left behind. But it's just one of the things that ekes me.
That's really it, man. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of saying the sky is falling right now, and the market is soft. The market is definitely softened. Like let's call it what it is. I mean, where are we in the market cycle? I would consider it, it's not very localized for sure, but I think we're in a recessionary period right now, looking at the market cycle where we are based on occupancy and prices and all that fun stuff in the multifamily space as well as the residential space. So just accept what it is. I don't think we're at the bottom yet. I think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. And that's okay. As an investor, I'm still buying. I tell my clients all the time, I buy for cash flow. So I don't necessarily care about equity as much. I like the way you said it. It's a longevity game, man. As long as you stay in, it's fine.
Isn't it weird how everybody, when the sky falls, they start screaming, but when the market's exploding like it was for 2 years and they were getting overpaid for their efforts, nobody wants to acknowledge that they're getting paid more for less effort. But when it's like we're working harder for less, it's just, and it's because people feel their pain and they identify it as something they don't want to have. And when they're having success, I think it's just all themselves, all of us do, when there's a lot of external market forces. But if they want to follow you, Matt, as we're coming to the end of this, thank you for coming on here. I know your time's not free and you did a great job. And I know you have a great story that's inspiring a lot, but we can't do it all in one podcast. So how do they follow you? Give them your YouTube channel, give them your IG stuff. And then if you shoot that to me, I'll put it in the description. And then how do they get your book? And if they want to work with you and they want to join you, once again, you guys can partner with Matt anywhere in the world that EXP operates. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's been fun to connect with agents all around the world. We had our first agent in India in my team a couple weeks ago, and it's just kind of crazy to see like we're connecting with people internationally on the other side of the world to help them grow their personal wealth through real estate, through EXP. So definitely love to connect with agents everywhere. But I'm Roar Gardner everywhere. So IG, Facebook, YouTube, it's at Roar Gardner, ROAR Gardner, GARDNER. And then if you want to get connected for my book piece, I have a newsletter that goes out, and that's where the pre-sales are going to be as well. It's roargardner.com. So make it easy. Everywhere it's just Roar Gardner.